Should you use brand names in your writing? Should one of your characters in your novel go to Starbucks and use their MacBook Pro? And today we are going to hear Stephen King speak at length on this topic. And you may be asking, Ian, is this really such a big deal? Well, I know that in my university creative writing program, professor after professor told us that if we used Starbucks or Apple in our stories, that we were ruining our piece's ability to become timeless, that people 100 years from now may not know what Starbucks was. And we've all experienced this before in classic literature. We've all read some of these older books before, and they are mentioning these things, and we're like, what the hell is this? And I'm sure those authors thought that that would never go out of style. And this sentiment, this dogma, has been repeated in countless other writing workshops I've attended outside of university. And so this is kind of one of these big topics that I don't see talked about very often. And so I want to bring in Stephen King to give his opinion. I also have a video that talks about David Foster Wallace's opinion on this topic, also down below in the description. And so if you do not already know, Write Conscious is the headquarters of everything related to Stephen King here on YouTube. In the playlist down below, you will find videos on Stephen King's books, his life, and his writing philosophy. And so enough for me, everyone. Let us now hear from King. I always knew people would have a problem with that. But I also knew that I was never going to stop doing it, and nobody was ever going to convince me that I was wrong doing it. Because every time I did it, what I felt inside was this little bang, like I nailed it dead square, like Michael Jordan on a fadeaway jump shot. Sometimes the brand name is the perfect word, and it will crystallize a scene for me. When Jack Torrance is pumping down that Excedrin in The Shining, you know just what that is. I always want to ask these critics, some are novelists, some are college literature professors, what the fuck do you do? Open your medicine cabinet and see empty gray bottles? Do you see generic shampoo, generic aspirin? When you go to the store and get a six-pack, does it say beer? When you go down and open your garage door, what's parked in there? A car? Just a car? And then I say to myself, I bet they do. Some of these guys, the college professors, the guys say, whose idea of literature really stopped with Henry James, but he'll get a kind of frozen smile on his face if you talk about Faulkner or Steinbeck. They're stupid about American fiction, and they've turned their stupidity into a virtue. They don't know who Calder Willingham was. They don't know who Sloan Wilson was. They don't know who Grace Metalius was. They don't know who any of these people are, and they are fucking proud of it. And when they open their medicine cabinet door, I think maybe they do see generic bottles, and that's a failure of observation. And I think one of the things that I'm supposed to do is to say, it's a Pepsi, okay? It's not a soda. It's a Pepsi. It's a specific thing. Say what you mean. Say what you see. Make a photograph if you can for the reader. And I love that King went there because it is actually true. The difference between a really great writer and someone who maybe talks about writing is awareness, is this ability to see. I talk about it on this channel all the time, that the greatest writers, especially the greatest poets, have this uncanny and insane ability to see reality, and that requires you to be aware. And in general, the typical American, the typical person is unaware, but we think that if you become more intelligent, that you become more aware, that the only people that are unaware of what's going on are just like the random NPCs running around town. But in actuality, if you have your nose stuck in a book all the time and you're a lowercase nerd, then a lot of the time, you are also highly unaware of your surroundings and what's going on. And what makes that important is that it's easier, if you feel that way, to fall into the dogma that you shouldn't use brand names, because if you are aware of what's happening around you at all times, because advertising is messaging. You know, you look at these logos up here, they are created by dudes that have vacation homes in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, to make you and I feel an emotional trigger, to make us feel more receptive to their brand or more hyped up or more sad, like whatever they are trying to do. And so if you are not aware of how reality is affecting you and the advertisements and everything in it, then you are numb. You have no idea what's going on, and you won't be a good writer. You are not an artist, and you're also not a conscious human being. And so you have to understand those things to understand their relationship and their contrast with reality. Because a big part of being a writer, really the only part, is understanding difference, understanding metaphor. I had a professor, Lee Barnes, who told me don't use brand names. He was adamant about that. He would just drill people. He ran the workshop. His workshops, like, you couldn't respond to him. So he would just, sit and really rail on your story, which was great in a lot of ways. And I learned a lot. But he told me a story because he had spent some time with Ken Kesey because they had a mutual friend. He had a mutual friend that was friends with Ken. And he was talking to Ken one time and asked him, why did you stop writing? And Ken told him that he took so many drugs and meditated and did all this stuff that he lost the ability to see metaphors. He lost the ability to see these massive differences in things, that everything kind of was one, which is great, for living and for being able to hit a more transcendent and mystical experience. But for writing, it's a nightmare. That's what you need, especially if you're going to be writing a novel. Because if you are asking someone to sit down for 5 hours and abstain from all the other forms of entertainment, then you're going to have to deliver something that's either very entertaining or very transformative. And both of those things work on contrast. The contrast with the characters and the setting and the hidden symbolism. And the only way that you can do that is by being able to recognize that in your own reality, by being good enough to see that in your own reality, and either bringing some of that content from your own reality into your book or transmuting it into something similar and then putting it in your book. And so I think that this is an awesome kind of analysis here by King, because by rejecting this idea, we are rejecting where we are right now. We are rejecting our current time and place. I think that political writing, political poetry, most of the time is very lame. And I think that Stephen King's digressions into politics have been generally lame too, and not a great source and a great direction for his creative energy. But when it works, when someone can write something that is perfect for its time. I am thinking right now of Infinite Jest by David Foster Wallace. David Foster Wallace predicted FaceTime. He predicted how negative FaceTime was going to be and the effect of technology and entertainment on us. He predicted the rise in drugs and crazy addiction problems that we have in our society right now. He had it all there. And in the 90s, it was even more perfect. It was a zeitgeist, a catalyst of the time. And you can't make something like that unless you are really connected to the time. David Foster Wallace was known for being a television addict, just spending 16 hours a day for long periods of his life watching television. He understood modern culture very well. And so, yes, many of us would like to maybe be the Cormac McCarthy's and write the next great literary historical novel or whatever, and that's cool too. But in actuality, if we want to create a literary renaissance, if you want to be a successful author, whether on the entertaining side or the transformative side, doesn't matter, then you are most likely going to need to be connected to something in the present, especially if you're not doing something super hacky. And so I would say that it's a better idea to lean into it, to not shy away from it. Some of the best writing is, and some of the best decisions that we can make in our life is walking into the eye of the storm. Because Stephen King is right. I remember that at one point in my life when I was super stressed, I was popping 4 Excedrin a day every single day. It was a problem. It basically turned into this addiction. Can you be addicted to Excedrin? Kind of, just the daily hit of aspirin, ibuprofen, and caffeine. And I was taking it because I was so stressed out. I was working full-time job and then having to commute down to the Las Vegas Strip to attend my university, UNLV, and it was just so stressful, so hot. Then when COVID happened and I could just teach English online, suddenly I didn't need it anymore. But when I look back at that time, I'm like, holy shit. So when I read The Shining, I knew exactly what King was getting at. And I read it way before I was pumping Excedrin like that, and I was just using it occasionally, but I knew what that meant. I need some Excedrin, and what does this mean? And so I also like King's description of it's like a little bang. You want as many of those as you can when you are writing. And if you can make those connections, but do it by any means necessary, because if you feel a bang and then you run it through the test and you're like, would this work for the audience? And you look at it and you're like, yeah, then that's all you have. As an author, we are sitting down and working on this piece and just praying, hoping that it lands with the audience. And so if there are emotional spikes that you are getting and you kind of run them through an objectivity test and they still stand, then you need that in there, because there are a lot of parts of a novel that as a writer, you're like, I don't know if this is going to work. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, but it feels like a desert. And so, boom, there it is, everyone. I think that we should use brand names. I think that we should be into it. It doesn't matter. Recently I was reading one of your guys' novels. One of my buddies, compatriots on here, just finished his novel, sent it over to me. I was reading it, and he was using brand names to a pretty deep effect. And there were just a couple sprinkled in there. But when they were there, I was like, wow, this is good. And so, boom, there you guys go. There you have it. Thank you guys for being here. If you guys want more Stephen King content, it is down below. I also have a compilation of Stephen King's favorite books and my ranking of Stephen King's books. I think I've read around 20 of Stephen King's books, and I've ranked them, and also have a comprehensive list of over 100 of King's favorite books. And so if you guys want to check out that, it is down in the description below, and I will see you guys very soon in my next video.